Hey, we are Summer and Candace. This is the Connected Life Book Club Season 3. So we are just now diving in. This is the first week to our new book. The new book is called Shades of Light by Sharon Garlow Brown. And it's a bummer.
No. It's okay.
Like a good, important bummer.
Like a good, important bummer. So this book, if you are just checking out this video and you haven't started reading yet, it tackles the issues, I guess, of anxiety and depression, mental illness in a Christian context, which I think is important.
They're really good things.
It can be a bummer, but it's a fiction book. It's a novel, which we are really excited about because I just feel like it's easier to read and consume fiction in my book. But anyways, this is also an important piece of what we're going to be doing here that's different from what we've done in podcasts in the past. This book has a study guide for a 6-week study that is available with it. And so rather than trying to write our own questions, we're going to use some of theirs. So we're going to be primarily camping on some of the questions in the group discussion portion, but it really has different spiritual activities and scriptures and contemplations for every day of the week. So we're just jumping into the end just for time's sake. But I hope that as a group or as an individual, you're able to explore some of those other rich things as well.
Yeah, so we're going to dive in. So this first week, which they map out in the study guide, is the prologue through chapter 5.
Yes.
And so we kind of get an introduction to the characters, to the situation, to all the important pieces. I will say, in the prologue, I wish they would have described Wren, the main character, a little bit more, because I thought she was like maybe in her late 40s. And then it said that she was 26, and I was like, oh, that paints a much different, like in the first chapter, paints a much different picture of who, especially when she was so concerned about the whales. No offense, people in your 40s. I bet you are concerned about the whales as well. But I was like, that seems like a very millennial thing. It does. But she is very concerned about the whales, which I get. It's a sad thing.
Yeah. And I think that's with Wren, one of the things I think by not describing her, that maybe you have an opportunity to put yourself more into her shoes. Because, I mean, they offer some descriptions, but it's not like a normal, I feel like, novel where they're like, and she had this color hair, and it was this long, and she had a little crinkle in her nose. Like, this is just, I think, a book where you are invited to step into the character's shoes and picture yourself where you need to picture yourself.
My soul is in my late 40s, and so maybe that's why.
You don't care about the whales, Candace, but what about the whales?
I care. I don't even use straws. Okay, so we're going to dive into a couple of the questions from the discussion guide. So the week 1 discussion guide, it has some really good recommendations for like if you are getting together in a small group, if there are just certain ways that you want to approach this book on a daily basis. It's really awesome. But we're going to dive into some of the overall questions. So the first one is, what struggles do you identify in Wren's life, in Jamie's, and do you share anything in common with them? So we're obviously introduced to their struggles. Some of the ones that stood out were the fact that, for me, in Wren's life, that she, of course, has this super difficult job as a social worker. And even as they're like describing some of the... I know that's real stuff. That's real life. But some of the really terrible things that happen to children and families that are just like shocking and kind of jolting to read, how those things, of course, affect her in a big way. But then on a grand scale, looking at the world as a whole, like we're talking about with the whales and the things that really just kind of live in the back of her mind and kind of feed this depression and anxiety that lives there constantly. And that was really interesting to me, that so many different things fed into that part of her mental illness.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on, because what she is communicating as well when she's at Glenwood, I think is the name of the hospital, is that she feels like she has no right to be hurting the way that she's hurting compared to everyone else's pain. Why am I here? What is, but the fact is it's depression and anxiety. You can rarely point to like, this is why I'm sad. But like the thing with the whales, she's fixating on something, and her sadness is cleaving to something to justify its existence. But the fact is she's sick, and it's there no matter what. But and that was something that I noticed too. It's like, why the whales? And I realized like it has very little to do with the whales. Like the whales are a problem, but that's ultimately not why she's sad.
Right. And even a little bit later, she mentioned like mild OCD tendencies, you know, so just to have something to spin on, something to fixate her attention. Even when she was talking about leaving Glenwood, and when the caseworker was like, hey, we think tomorrow probably we're going to be able to send you home, and it like incited a panic attack, even though that's what she's been wanting in her rational mind and her, you know, just kind of walking through life mind. That's what she's been thinking about. But all of a sudden the reality of it gave her that sense of panic and that overwhelmed feeling again. And so maybe the fact that like as she's working through things, she doesn't even realize the depth of all that she's working through. And so I thought that was really interesting. Let's see, the question, what struggles do you identify in Wren or Jamie's life? And so Jamie is her mom. And I understand firsthand experience, I'd say, from both Wren and Jamie. You know, I struggle with anxiety. That's something that I definitely deal with, which is so funny because I also feel like I don't necessarily care about a lot, but there's this like deep underlying like making sure other people are happy that like eats away at me a little bit. And when it comes to accomplishing projects or I don't know, sometimes just waking up in the morning, it can just really wear on me. But then looking at things from Jamie's perspective as the mom and not knowing, should I step in? Should I not? Should I call? Should I be involved? Should I respect her privacy? Should I stay home? Like just every single option possible and not knowing where to go.
Yeah, I think for me, in my younger years, I was more of a Wren. Not clinically the way that Wren is, but I would struggle with depressed episodes where I just felt like I couldn't function. Like there was all these things that I needed to do and I knew that I needed to do them. And the very fact that they were there overwhelmed me and I couldn't function. And so I would go through seasons of that. And so I understand just that helplessness and feeling lost and drifting and all of that. But I think at this season of my life, I really identified with Jamie in the sense of, well, I'm a mom now. And so like you have this worry for your kids and that understanding of how and when to step in. Now my kids are 2 and 4, so I step in most of the time for most of the things. But it really just wrecked me on behalf of Jamie, that worried mom with an adult child who is far away and saying, thanks, Mom, but I don't need you right now. And just, I can just imagine what it would be like to just be so scared and so desperately want to be there, but then want to respect those boundaries. And for her to say, thanks, but no thanks. And just feeling that helplessness, like that call to action, but the inability to move. It just, Aurelia, my 4-year-old, she's 4, but lately she will choose words or phrases as she's trying to grapple with what she's feeling that are scary to me. Like she will get mad at something and she'll say like, I just don't even want to be in this world anymore. Now she's 4.
Yeah.
Like the implications are lost to her of what that might really look like. But then I think as a mom of a 4-year-old, I had to start thinking way earlier than I ever expected. What if my daughter grows up and struggles with those kind of thoughts? What if my daughter battles depression or suicidal ideology and like all of that? And it's just like, it scared me to death, fast forwarding in my mind and wondering what that would be like. And then coming to this book right after that. And then just then seeing myself in Jamie in that way. And just feeling helpless.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. And that is what we're just going to dive right into in this book.
Welcome to the Connected Life Book Club podcast.
Well, and it's interesting too, because especially as she's I thought it was really interesting when she was in Glenwood, and she's, immediately had that issue with Sylvia, another one of the patients, and how that then kind of transformed into a good thing. And it kind of transformed her relationship to these other patients. And obviously, Wren is obsessed with Vincent van Gogh, which I think it provides a nice little structure to the story. I get that. But the fact that Vincent van Gogh saw his other asylum patients, people that were in that with him as like fellow sufferers, and he had this compassion for them, and that she was able to find that because of his compassion, I thought was really cool. And that growth was really interesting. So we'll skip down to number 4. Okay. What challenged you in the character's journey this week, and what invitation did you sense from God as you move forward?
So I guess the word challenged is a challenging word in this question, because I'm like, I wasn't sure how to think of that. I'm like, what challenged me?
Sure.
Or like, there were things that I found myself, though, really resonating with this week in a challenging way, which I didn't expect. Like reading this book, I'm like, oh, what a nice story. And oh yeah, what good writing. I can totally feel what the character's feeling here, etc. But this week there was some really hard news that came about, and we're just trying as a family, just trying to like grapple with it and understand what the next steps are and how to move forward. And is anything going to change? Is there hope? And just feeling that place where you're like, I know God's faithful, and I know he doesn't want me to feel this way, but I mean, my goodness, I don't even know how to pray right now. And just feeling in like that place is something that I don't often find myself there, but I think we're there this week. And so there was a quote that I ended up highlighting from when Hannah, her pastor, came to visit.
Yeah.
And I think just her example was really enlightening of like how she offered Wren her dignity and like understanding without trying to explain away her problems. Yeah. I thought that was just a good lesson on how to help. But the quote is on page 42, and it says, "It's not your grip on God, it's his grip on you, especially when you're too tired to cling."
Yeah.
Because I think we're just in a season right now where I'm just like, I have to trust, because I'm finding like there's nothing I can do.
Right.
And it's a hard but good place to be. And so that quote just really jumped out at me this week.
Yeah. I mean, even the image that she kind of brought along with that quote, where she's like, I was holding a baby doing baptism, and, the baby was holding onto my finger, thinking maybe that was the only way that that baby was connected to me, but really didn't realize that I was holding him completely. And, I think that's a really good picture of how our relationship with God works, because we just have no clue. We have no idea. And even as she's talking about the cliff face and the hands and the cup hands and, things like that, it's like, it's a great display of peace and a reminder that God is holding on to us. I think something that was challenging for me in this reading was her original relationship to the other patients, because I could see how in moments of anxiety and depression, when those things are totally overwhelming you, that you are at the center of everything. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's not that she's worried about the whales. She's worried she can't do anything to help. It's some sort of like pressure on ourselves, and it's really self-focused mentality. And I find myself in that a lot, where it's like the times when I am frustrated, it's because I can't do enough, or I'm not doing enough, or I. Whereas as she's looking at a more big picture and sees that it really is up to God, and we're just here in his presence and being held by him, I think that that's a really important transition to make. It's not us scaling the cliff face. It's letting God lift us up in those really hard moments. And there was something Pastor Hannah said too. I don't remember exactly, but she talked about the permission, like giving God permission to assert his control. You know, that we kind of pretend like we have any sort of input in the control of the greater picture. And so I thought that was really good. It was kind of challenging to like look at that from my own perspective and where I'm at in that.
Yeah. And one of the things you're mentioning, her relation to the other patients, one of the things that I just felt like I really connected to was her lack of patience for the patients.
Right.
Because I'm a words of affirmation person, and so I'm always trying to be very careful with how I communicate to people to make sure I'm not hurting anyone's feelings. But there are times where you are so tired and exhausted and overwhelmed. It's like I can make every excuse for you in the book. I know why you're doing this. I know I shouldn't, judge you, or I should be like super nice all the time. But like I can't today. Like I just can't do it. And every once in a while I get to that point where it's like, I just can't do it. And so when she lost her temper on this very, sick woman, I'm just like, oh, girl. Oh, I know. But yeah.
That is tough.
Yeah.
So another question that she talks about is, they recommend that you share one item from your beauty inventory, which they didn't really go into like the beauty inventory in the book, but the fact that Wren is so affected by natural beauty, by art, and how that can calm her spirit and really connect her to God. And even when Pastor Hannah brings the sunflowers, that just affected her in such a deep way, and those things she tends to cling to. So I guess the question then would be, what are those things that you cling to in the hard moments and the tough moments when you need a reminder of God's love?
So, I mean, I always feel connected to God and nature when I'm, on a hike or just looking at beauty and stuff. But one of the things I sometimes turn to when I am feeling just really off kilter, I guess, and overwhelmed and just, and I need to like come back to center is Celtic music.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about like Irish music, but I mean, and Irish hymns are great, but like even just instrumental jigs and stuff. I don't know. It's just like,
you're gonna have to play some of that for me later.
It's just, I don't know, just the joy in it. But like, I don't know. I feel like Celtic music has the ability to be very lively and joy, but also very emotional, and it's just very pleasing to me to listen to.
Yeah.
And so I always feel like when I'm just soaking up Celtic music, I feel better.
All right. I like that. That's nice.
What's in your beauty inventory, Candace?
I think for me, I've noticed that because I noticed that when I tend to isolate myself, whether I'm like feeling really down, feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, I'm just like, I need to get away from everything and sleep a bunch and watch TV and whatever. Those things tend to make that attitude, make that like bad feeling kind of fester, because I am an extrovert. I do find energy in connecting with other people. And so actually getting out, being intentional about connecting with somebody is what helps draw me out of those dark moments. I mean, I've had times where it's like, I'm just sick about going to an event because I'm overwhelmed with whatever sort of perceived anxiety or whatever is facing me, and then I actually go and I'm like, this is actually exactly what I needed, to just connect with people, to be in the presence of others. And so I guess people are in my beauty box. I mean, my beauty inventory.
People are in my beauty box. You need to let those people go. It's a hostage situation right now. No, I mean, it reminded me, like sometimes you just have to force yourself to do the things that are going to help. And sometimes in those moments, it's the hardest thing to read your Bible, to pray, to drink enough water, to exercise. It's like sometimes those things that are the best for us. I was talking to a listener recently, and he just had wanted to share. He goes, this last year of my life has been so hard. And he shared some of the things. And he said, sometimes you just need to turn the music up and force yourself to sing along. Ooh. And I'm just like, whoo, goosebumps. He goes, because darkness cannot go where the light is shining. And so for him, that's what Christian music does, is it when he forces himself to just stop and to focus on the words and to sing at the top of his lungs, even when he doesn't want to, it brings him to a better place.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's even been proven. Science has proven that if you force yourself to smile, it literally releases endorphins. If you just
So
sit
much
there.
better now.
Should just do that. If you literally force yourself to smile for minutes on end, you will eventually feel happier. It's how it works, and it's
Science.
so hard to remember that, okay, if I force myself to do those good things, those things that I know are going to help, because that's the last thing you want to do.
Sometimes that it sounds weird, but like that depression, that sadness, it's comforting. It's like it's like a blanket. And especially if that's that place you live in, a lot of the time it's scary to think of not being there anymore. It's
Right.
this safety blanket, the sadness, and it's messed up that we think that way, but I get it.
I mean, that's the whole point. And I really love how they are just diving headfirst into stereotypes and ways that Christians have downplayed mental illness. I mean, that is such a prevalent topic, and I mean, we can even get caught up in it. Do the right thing, read your Bible. It's like, but really, for people struggling with mental illness, it is just coming down to taking your meds. I mean, like treating the illness for what it is, an illness.
Yeah.
And so we're diving a little bit deeper into that as we go into this book. Maybe this is your time where you're going, oh, I think I know somebody who needs to be a part of this. And that's awesome. We want to be able to connect with as many people as possible. We want people to find the message of hope that goes along with some of the really hard topics that are also in this book. So if you want to invite your friends, make sure they sign up at connectedlifebookclub.com. It's a good place that you start there, sign up, then join the Facebook group, because I know a lot of people will just say, hey, I want my friend to do this, and they'll add them to the Facebook group, but we want to make sure they have all the resources possible. So sign up at connectedlifebookclub.com.
And if you haven't already, subscribe for our podcast, and it will automatically download if you have, I don't know, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcast, not an Android user,
Okay.
or Spotify. However you choose to listen to your podcast, just search for Connected Life Book Club, and we are excited to go on this bummer, hopeful journey with you.
It happens. Now it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're excited for you to start and read along with us.
Yes.